Hello YouTube, Chrisiosity here. How's it going? Well, it's time for part 2 of our little exploration into rape culture on film, but I've got good news for you all. I've decided not to show any more rape scenes. Yay! I've done this partly to spare us having to watch them, but also for reasons that I hope will become obvious as we go on. And do go watch the first video, which I will link here, if you haven't, because it's gonna get referenced and it won't make a lot of sense if you don't. So, let me start out by being just honest and say this video has really got me down. I went into it with a general plan to write a script on how we've come a long way, but we still have a long way to go, and etc, etc. Here's things we can do to improve even more. But I was wrong. We haven't come a long way. There are some positive things that have happened, but in fact, we are in a bad place, people. I'm so depressed. Bad place. Okay, so let's talk about some of the things that are going on, but before we do, I want to highlight a couple of comments I got from the last video. I got a few interesting ones, but this one individual is someone I want to highlight. Wolfrunner27, and I'd like people to keep these comments in mind as we go along.
Chino was a great movie. Bronson was the man. He saw it, he wanted it, he took it. She loved it. And as you mentioned, she actually wanted it as well. As for High Plains Drifter, well, what to say. The woman in that instigated the whole encounter. She played a dangerous game of get away closer and got what she wanted. She merely wanted it to make it look like it did so she could have an excuse. The second woman had the chance to leave. She gave herself to him. That was plain to everyone watching the movie. And ultimately, this movie was about vengeance. Vengeance against everyone. Edit. In this day and age, there is no patriarchy. And for the record, 85% of the women I have been with were into rough sex and rape-style activity in the bed. So, there's that. Man, you're actually not so bright. The problem isn't that some women may fantasize about such or would enjoy it. It's that it's assumed all women feel this way, often to rationalize rape. You know, which is exactly what rape culture is. This is not what rape culture is. Rape culture, such as it exists, say in the Middle East, is a culture that actually allows and condones rape. It is a culture that places the onus of the action on the victim, not on the assailant. Here in the US, rape is reviled. It's a crime of high order and people's lives are ruined at the mere accusation of it. Are there disturbed individuals that have fetishes about it? Yes. Are there head cases that do it? Yes. Does this mean we as society condone it? Not a chance. More men are raped every year in the US than women, but you never hear this. You hear stupid shit like, do not teach women to protect themselves. Teach men not to rape. We do teach everyone not to rape. From a very young age. Just some people are fucked up. You hear stupid shit like listen and believe, but more and more people are being busted almost daily for false allegations. You hear stupid shit like all men are rapists, but you see daily about female teachers getting arrested for raping male students. All of these people are taught not to do the things they do, but they still do them. We teach not to kill, but murders happen. Do we live in a murder culture? A theft culture? A litter culture? You fucking people, you are what is destroying this country. At Lemon Zest. Made your skin crawl, made my dick hard. Tomato, tomato.
Now, I could make a whole video just on what's wrong with these comments, but for now, I only want to point out a couple of quick things. Now, when it comes to people consensually doing fantasy stuff with one another, that's a totally different thing. You know, tie it up, spank it, choke it a little, whatever people do together that they agree to do together is all good, Robin Hood. You know, what makes the scene from Chino and the first scene from High Plains Drifter different is just that, the lack of consent. Look, these are movies, obviously, fiction, and that makes it a bit strange to talk about. However, if this was put into the real world, these events would be rape. Take Chino. If you remember, Chino and the Jill Ireland character go out to a remote area together. Chino's a horse breeder. They're meant to be looking at horses or something. They have an agreement that they're going for some business reason. Chino comes up behind her while she's sitting on a rock. She looks at him. He starts to take some of his clothes off. She gets up and runs away screaming. He catches her, drags her to the ground while she fights him, throwing punches and struggling to get away. Once he has her under his physical control, he grabs her head in both of his hands and holds her there, and after a moment of this, she makes a move to kiss him. Now, why would this not be consent? Well, because meaningful consent can't happen under duress. In the real world, there would be no way to tell the difference here between somebody who suddenly changed their mind about desperately not wanting to have sex with you, or someone who realizes they are in mortal danger and are so terrified of being maimed or killed that they pretend to go along with whatever you do, right? That is rape. And yes, Wolf Runner, your apologism, along with the way you can't seem to separate male fantasy and wish fulfillment in fiction from reality, is rape culture. I get that you prefer to have your own special definition of rape culture, one that specifically makes it not about you, but by the actual established definition, you are just textbook example. And you've been blocked. Thank you. So, now that we've made that clear, let's skip forward to the present. And I'll be honest, media-wise, I'm a little out of the loop. I got kids, I'm busy. A lot of my viewing habits revolve around kids shows and YouTube videos at this point. But, as I said, I went into researching this with much more optimism than I have now. So, what did I find that was so problematic? Problematic stuff number 1, glut. There is a problem of volume and degree out there. First off, you have a lot of torture porn, rape porn, etc. It's very widely available, but let's put that conversation aside for now. I plan to do maybe a video or a blog at some point, so we'll just leave that for then. But what's relevant here is that it seems like porn has had some influence, because you see, for instance, quite a few horror films that involve this kind of revenge torture porn, some of which just features long, repetitive scenes of sexual violence. And then you have higher brow fare, like Irreversible, which features a very explicit 9-minute long rape scene. And there are lots and lots and lots of other movies with all degree of brow placement in there. Highbrow, lowbrow, everywhere. And then when it comes to television, you have shows like Law and Order SVU, Game of Thrones, lots of others, all of which just feature lots and lots of rape. Did I mention that there was just a lot of it? And very little of this great big heap of rape on film that you get is particularly good or insightful. For the most part, it seems to be trading off of sexual assault, this terribly real horror and pain for far too many people. But these shows trade off of this horror to get some kind of edginess or that veneer of gritty reality that is so coveted to titillate and to sort of yank the audience chain around a bit, if you will. But they don't offer much back. You would hope to squeeze a bit more value out of all of this sheer volume, but it's just not there. The two most common storylines you tend to see when rape is central to the plot are the justice or revenge storylines. On the plus side, these stories treat rape as crimes and the perpetrators as criminals. In one study, done on male college students, the students were asked about the crime show franchises they watched, and then asked about rape myths and consent by being asked to agree or disagree with different statements, like if a woman is raped, she's at least somewhat responsible for letting things get out of control. And the study found that watching Law and Order was correlated with lower acceptance of rape myths and more awareness of the need for consent. The CSI franchise was exactly the opposite, which is unfortunate as CSI gets higher ratings, and NCIS was fairly neutral. It's very difficult to tease out correlation versus causation here. And it's only the one study, but it offers at least some hope that shows can help get some messages through. Unfortunately, while the Law and Order franchise is probably better than most, it is still primarily an entertainment medium. It's not there to educate, and it's certainly been a platform of sensationalism, using lurid details to pull in an audience, not to mention its pretty awful depictions of trans individuals in some cases, which are, as they themselves might say, particularly heinous, as trans people are victimized at very high rates. Then we've got the revenge storyline. Here, an interesting change has taken place over time, where previously a rape would happen to a woman in order to set up a man going to avenge it for her. At least sometimes this has been altered to a woman going out and avenging herself. This is certainly an improvement. So what's your problem then, you may be asking? To which I reply, well, fine, if you're going to be pushy about it, then I'll tell you. Jeez. Problematic shit number 2, what is even reality? The rapes in most of these stories are described in, as I said, lurid detail as obviously sadistic, mustache-twirling bad guys perform horrendous acts on women. Afterwards, the women respond with rage and commit acts ranging from torture, assault, sexual assault as table turning, and homicide. The problem with this and all of these tropes we've been talking about is how very, very far removed they are from reality. In cop shows, rape crimes are pursued with utmost zeal by deeply committed law enforcement officers. Victims are treated with consideration, and justice is almost always served. In reality, hundreds of thousands of rape kits sit moldering, untested on shelves, and statistically, a very small number of women will see any justice whatsoever. And of course, it's not just women, men, trans people, really anybody. If you are a victim of this kind of assault, your chances are not good of seeing anybody do any actual time for it, or even be convicted. Also, most rapes are committed by acquaintances, everyday people who act in day-to-day life just as nice and normal as anybody. And let's talk about the victims for a minute. Seems like somebody ought to. Far from what you may see on TV, most victims are people of color, people with disabilities, trans individuals, or from other marginalized groups. In America, due largely to the rape cultures in for-profit prisons and the military, men are raped more often than in most cultures, though it still appears not as often as other groups, and the vast majority of rapists are men. There's no one way that people who have been raped respond to their trauma. Depression, apathy, shock, denial, numbness, guilt, all possible, as there are a mix of reactions. People often judge rape victims who don't show the response they expect. Statistically speaking, men are much more likely than women to respond with aggression and rage, and this may be part of the reason male writers and directors produce so many stories where women seek violent retribution, as they assume that that sort of response is the norm. However, women are much more likely to exhibit denial, self-blame, or to have a delayed reaction. Many victims will not acknowledge their trauma, even to themselves, for weeks or months. The memory is affected, and victims will often confuse details or forget large chunks of time. None of these are signs that a victim is lying about their trauma, but many people take it this way. Psychologists have found that the trauma from rape is particularly severe and long-lasting. For instance, researchers measuring cortisol levels, cortisol being a hormone related to stress, found that the levels of rape victims who've been reminded of the incident will remain higher for longer than other PTSD sufferers. Victims of rape and sexual assault face long-term effects and are significantly more likely to suffer drug and alcohol addiction, depression, suicide attempts, eating disorders, self-harm, and a host of other psychiatric issues. They are also statistically at a higher risk of being assaulted again. While researchers aren't sure why this is, it's important to note that this is not limited to rape. For instance, robbery victims are more likely to be robbed again, even when other factors are controlled for. What we do know is that how assault victims are treated in the aftermath has a real impact on their healing. Victims given understanding, emotional support and empathy will heal better and faster than those subjected to hostility, indifference, disbelief, all unfortunately common reactions in our culture. Alright, I will link some stuff, but that's enough about that for now. Let's get on to problematic issue number 3. We still don't know what consent is. There are multiple scenes I could talk about here, but I can't think of a better example of this problem than the scene between Jaime and Cersei Lannister in Game of Thrones. The reason being that the writers actually didn't notice that they had written and filmed a rape scene. In this very brief scene, and I'm going to link the video that shows it, Cersei and Jaime visit their dead son. Cersei asks Jaime to avenge the boy. They embrace. But after a moment, she pulls away. Jaime grabs her and pushes her up against the dais where their deceased child lies, and she says repeatedly, "Stop, stop, stop." Jaime says no, brings her to the floor, and continues. Cersei continues to protest. "Don't, not here, it isn't right." And Jaime says he doesn't care. The scene ends on Cersei continuing to tell him to stop while he ignores her. Now, this scene was met with some real horror from fans who were surprised by the sudden turnaround in the character of Jaime Lannister, who had been developing as a sympathetic character with surprising depth. In the books, this scene was not written in this way, just the opposite, and the showrunners were surprised that everybody got so horrified. They never meant it to be a rape. They didn't think it was. Despite having written and filmed the pull away, the repeated objections, even a weepy sob, they just thought this was sex with, as they put it, power dynamics that made things hot. Pardon me while I drink a little. It helps. It's never addressed again. Just another day at the House of Lannister, I guess. Fans were left wondering what the hell to do with the scene, and ended up just trying to put it aside and move on. As we do. As we do. All these protestations of how people understand consent, no one has to tell anyone anything. Well, no, they don't. Look, some people apparently still need "do not eat" written on the little bags of silica gel you get in your shoes. Are you protesting that? Are you protesting OSHA trainings that tell you to bend from your knees for the 97th time? How about don't take these things so fucking personally, okay? If it helps to clarify the difference between power dynamics and rape for one idiot, one time, I would consider it time well spent, wouldn't you? And because I don't want you to say that I never gave you anything, here's the thing those writers apparently didn't get around to seeing back in the early 90s.
You know that her mouth is saying no, but you're sure that there are parts of her saying yes, not to mention parts of you. What part do you listen to? Her mouth. And then you go outside, take a swim in an unheated pool. So it's not my job to get her off the hook or to help her give it up. Man, if you think that's your job, your next job will be pressing license plates. Get out of here. Hey, what you talking about is rape. No, Walter, this isn't some wacko in the bushes with a raincoat. This is you and your honey. Now, I don't care, man. If the woman says no and you don't listen to her, it's rape. Plain and simple, case closed, 10 to 20.
Alright, let's pull this together. There are examples of better efforts out there, such as The Accused, Nick. Yes, I've seen The Accused. 20 years ago, such as Jennifer Jones on Netflix, which detail the struggles victims face. And when you see these better efforts, they tend to have women in prominent roles, both in front of and behind the camera. And that's what's needed. More women empowered to tell their part of this story. And it's not that men can't tell this story or empathize. It's that to do that, they would have to be willing to listen. And there's not much out there right now, one, to listen to. Also, from where I stand, that's not a thing we do often or well. When rape victims share their stories, they get abuse. It's that simple. If you look at YouTube videos where women have brought their stories out, they inevitably are confronted with hatefulness and anger. Hell, when I came out with a story of not being raped, on my Cosby video, I shared an anecdote about a friend telling me he had seen someone put something in my drink, and nothing happened as far as sexual assault. No one was named or accused of anything, and still, I got shit for it from dudes in my comment section. One seriously creepy dude filled up multiple comment threads with his crazy bile, so I warned him to stop, he didn't, I blocked him. Then he started following me on other social media platforms, and I blocked him. And he made sock accounts to continue to harass me and tweeted to other people I was friendly with as well. I eventually got rid of him. But if that's a sort of thing that happens over a story as simple as that, one without an actual rape, I don't even want to think about what would happen if I told a story of actually being assaulted. And that's how it works. It's erasure. It's an awful kind of erasure, because it's like being drowned out in noise. All this slickly produced content out there, but it offers the twisted funhouse mirror view of reality, while actual victims get to feel invisible and alone. Even the relatively benign act of letting people know beforehand that you may be discussing rape is widely mocked in our culture, where we talk about snowflakes getting triggered. We know, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that there are millions of people out there who've been sexually assaulted. Many, if not most of whom, will never tell you about it. We say it's the worst crime in our culture, or at least up there, and we say we know how devastating it is. But the idea of giving it a heads up in terms of a content warning for those situations where it's not obvious going in that rapey content is coming, nah, screw that. Hell with those wimps. And if we inadvertently cause people to relive the trauma they have tried so hard to hide, well, I guess they need to learn to take a joke. Come on, people. We need to do a better job, and we need to hold ourselves and each other accountable. We need to let victims speak up, women speak up, let everyone speak up. We need to hear. And because art is never perfectly separate from the culture that produces it and the people in the culture that produces it, maybe in a couple of decades, if we do this, someone can actually make the video I was hoping to make. The one where we talk about how far we've come. The one where we can look back at our past mistakes and just be bemused that we could ever have been so stupid and be glad we got beyond all that at last. That would be nice. This has been Chrisiosity, thanking you as always for listening. And you liked it, so thumbs up, and you want more, so subscribe. Bye!